Hope everybody doing cool. We're gonna play a quick video, then we're gonna get up out of here. But gonna start off with some music. You know, it's best to know thyself. You feel me? Hope y'all enjoyed the Sunday service. Came through. Shouts out to everybody that came through. You know, I know what it is. Shouts out to the congregation. You dig? We need y'all to know thyself. You feel me? I think I hit the wrong one. Wait a minute. Gotta set everything up again.
The Bluetooth device is connected successfully.
All right. Let's hit it. Let me know if y'all hear it. I started off with this and we're gonna get to the live.
When you know, you know. 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 When you know, you know.
When you know yourself, you see the vision, multi-dimension, parallel worlds which you were sitting. Shadow work in the work. I was an introvert, grown out the shell, time to put in work up in the burst. I think government, Democrats, and Republicans, fucking mulligan. Only get one shot, then I'm done with it. I'm the master, I calculated the data with dark matter. Using the elements, make the space shatter. Hate chatter, fed softer than cake batter. Let's take matters from Earth to space battles. Like an anime, from Sunday through Saturday. Using alchemy, playing with magic like I'm a fantasy. Final boss, the blade longer than Sephiroth. Black Messiah, hell yeah, I bear the cross. I'm a rebel, fight for a cause. The universal law, fight the enemy through the stars.
When you know, you know. 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 When you know, you know.
When you know yourself, you see the power, the very power that turning enemies to cowards. They get devoured. I turn the minutes into hours, they look sour. Heard the game just like the clock tower. Spit the mantra, analytical monster. With the truth, I'm a conquer. Enemies acting bonkers. I'm exuberant, stay maneuvering, hooligan. Super kick to the moon again. Hell no, I ain't doing no. Destroy the temple when using powers of elementals. So essential to my team, despite the differential. I'm a warrior, keep it simple. My flow make it triple. Instrumental cause it did mention no time ripples. Feel good into light sickles or slice missiles. Put together man, I turn tanks into bicycles. I'm a rebel, fight for a cause. Universal law, throw the enemy through the stars, kill them all.
When you know, you know. When you know, you know. When you know, you know. When you know. When you know, you know. When you know, you know. When you know, you know. Yeah.
Better know thyself, you better listen. Make it take everything you hear it. Better know thyself, you better listen. You hear it? Better know thyself, you better listen. Better take thyself, better know thyself, you better listen. Let that be right. Make it take it. Better know thyself, you better listen. Let that be right. You better listen. Better know thyself, you better listen. Gotta know thyself, you better listen. Pay attention. Better know thyself, you better listen.
How's everybody doing? All right, let's get off into it. '21. Let's go.
Moments when the mind notices something before reality confirms it. A strange silence in someone's voice. A delayed reply that feels heavier than it should. A smile that arrives half a second too late. And yet, most people ignore these moments. Not because the signs are unclear, but because accepting them would destroy the version of reality they desperately want to keep alive. This is why intuition is so unsettling. It does not arrive like logic. It does not explain itself politely. It simply appears, like a shadow moving at the edge of perception. And somehow deep down you already know. Carl Jung believed the unconscious mind absorbs far more than consciousness can process. Every expression, contradiction, and hesitation, behavioral shift, the mind records all of it silently. Long before conscious understanding arrives, another part of you has already reached a conclusion. That strange feeling you call intuition is often the unconscious mind speaking first. But modern people have learned to distrust it. They trust appearances, they trust words, they trust social performance. Because intuition forces confrontation, and confrontation threatens emotional comfort. So people stay inside explanations instead. He's probably just tired. Maybe I'm overthinking. I shouldn't judge too quickly. Meanwhile, the body continues reacting to something the conscious mind refuses to admit. The disturbing part is this. Your intuition is usually strongest when someone is hiding something. Not necessarily deception in the dramatic sense. Sometimes it is resentment, sometimes envy, sometimes emotional withdrawal. Human beings rarely reveal themselves directly. They leak
Let's
themselves
start that from
slowly
the beginning.
through
We're starting this from the beginning. Let's go.
moments when the mind notices something before reality confirms it. A strange silence in someone's voice. A delayed reply that feels heavier than it should. A smile that arrives half a second too late. And yet, most people ignore these moments. Not because the signs are unclear, but because accepting them would destroy the version of reality they desperately want to keep alive. This is why intuition is so unsettling. It does not arrive like logic. It does not explain itself politely. It simply appears, like a shadow moving at the edge of perception. And somehow deep down you already know. Carl Jung believed the unconscious mind absorbs far more than consciousness can process. Every expression, contradiction, and hesitation, behavioral shift, the mind records all of it silently. Long before conscious understanding arrives, another part of you has already reached a conclusion. That strange feeling you call intuition is often the unconscious mind speaking first. But modern people have learned to distrust it. They trust appearances, they trust words, they trust social performance. Because intuition forces confrontation, and confrontation threatens emotional comfort. So people stay inside explanations instead. He's probably just tired. Maybe I'm overthinking. I shouldn't judge too quickly. Meanwhile, the body continues reacting to something the conscious mind refuses to admit. The disturbing part is this. Your intuition is usually strongest when someone is hiding something. Not necessarily deception in the dramatic sense. Sometimes it is resentment, sometimes envy, sometimes emotional withdrawal. Human beings rarely reveal themselves directly. They leak themselves slowly, through tone, timing, energy, absence, and the unconscious notices all of it. This is why certain people can enter a room smiling while simultaneously making you feel exhausted. Nothing visible happens. No obvious conflict appears, yet something inside you immediately tightens. The conscious mind asks for evidence. The unconscious mind already has it. Most people spend years betraying themselves because they were trained to prioritize social harmony over psychological truth. They learned that being nice matters more than being aware. So they ignore discomfort, ignore patterns, ignore contradiction, until reality eventually forces recognition. And reality is brutal when it arrives late. People don't resent your weakness. They resent the possibility that you might outgrow them. The dangerous thing about intuition is that it begins quietly, but once ignored repeatedly, it transforms into suffering. Because every ignored instinct slowly becomes self-betrayal. You knew they were manipulating you. You knew the friendship was one-sided. You knew the respect was disappearing, but you waited for undeniable proof, as if the soul needs paperwork before it is allowed to protect itself. Most people are not disconnected from intuition because they lack it. They are disconnected because truth has consequences, and consequences terrify people more than deception does. There is a reason certain environments drain you before anything even happens. The body reacts to psychological tension faster than the mind can explain it. You walk into a room and suddenly become quieter, more alert, more careful with your words. At first, you think you are imagining it. But then you notice something strange. Around some people, you naturally expand. Around others, you unconsciously shrink. That reaction is rarely accidental. Jung understood that human beings communicate on levels far beneath language, beneath politeness, beneath social masks, beneath personality itself. Most interaction is unconscious negotiation. Who holds power? Who seeks validation? Who envies? Who fears abandonment? Who needs control? And intuition detects these invisible dynamics before logic catches up.
This is why manipulators often dislike highly intuitive people. Not because intuitive people expose them publicly, but because they cannot be controlled as easily. A manipulator survives through confusion. They rely on delayed awareness, on emotional fog, on your willingness to doubt yourself longer than you should. The moment you trust your instincts, their influence weakens. And this is exactly why modern social conditioning trains people to disconnect from themselves. You are told to ignore your discomfort, ignore your anger, ignore your suspicion, ignore your emotional reactions. Everything becomes overthinking. But overthinking and intuition are not the same thing. Overthinking is noisy, intuition is quiet. Overthinking spirals, intuition observes. Overthinking desperately searches for certainty. Intuition simply notices patterns, and patterns reveal character faster than words ever will. A person who secretly resents you may still compliment you. A person losing respect for you may still say, "I love you." A dishonest person may maintain perfect eye contact while lying, but behavior always leaks truth eventually, not through dramatic betrayal, through repetition, the same subtle dismissals, the same hidden competition, the same emotional inconsistency. Most relationships don't end when respect disappears. They end when awareness appears. That is the moment intuition becomes dangerous. Because once you truly see someone, you cannot unsee them. This is what would probably see someone, you cannot unsee them. And many people spend their entire lives trying to avoid that moment. Not because humans love deception, but because clarity destroys emotional attachment. The mind would rather preserve illusion than experience grief. So it negotiates with reality. It's not that bad. They didn't mean it. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Meanwhile, the unconscious continues collecting evidence in silence. This creates a fracture inside people. One part sees the truth, the other part performs denial. And the longer this internal conflict continues, the more exhausted a person becomes. This is why chronic self-betrayal often feels like anxiety. The body carries the tension of truths the conscious mind refuses to accept. You can feel this especially in relationships where your intuition keeps returning no matter how much logic tries to silence it. Because deep down, intuition is not emotional paranoia. It is pattern recognition sharpened by survival. Long before civilization, human beings survived by sensing danger before danger fully revealed itself. A slight shift in behavior, an unnatural silence, a broken rhythm. The nervous system learned to detect threats hidden beneath appearance. That instinct never disappeared. Society simply taught people to mistrust it. And the frightening part is this. The more emotionally attached you become to someone, the harder it becomes to hear your own intuition clearly. Because attachment creates psychological blindness. You stop seeing behavior for what it is. You start seeing it for what you hope it means. And hope is one of the most effective sedatives ever created. Jung believed that what people refuse to confront within themselves does not disappear. It sinks into the unconscious, into the shadow. And from there, it begins controlling behavior indirectly. This is why some people sabotage relationships they desperately want to keep. Why others become hostile toward people who did nothing to them. Why envy often appears disguised as criticism. The conscious personality says one thing, the shadow says another, and intuition often notices the contradiction before the person themselves becomes aware of it. You can hear it in forced kindness, feel it in unnatural generosity, see it in smiles that never reach the eyes, because human beings reveal themselves most clearly through emotional inconsistency. Someone who genuinely respects you does not repeatedly make you feel small. Someone who values you does not subtly compete with you every time you succeed. Someone who loves you does not leave you emotionally confused after every interaction. Confusion itself is often information. Emotionally healthy connections create clarity. Manipulative connections create self-doubt, and yet many people remain trapped in usually it whispers first, a quiet hesitation, a thing is slightly off, does not subtly compete with you every time you succeed. Someone who loves you does not leave you emotionally confused after every interaction. Confusion itself is often information. Emotionally healthy connections create clarity. Manipulative connections create self-doubt, and yet many people remain trapped in usually
in toxic relationships. That's how people get trapped in toxic relationships. But like he cut it. I don't know why it cut. I don't know if it was a mistake or he cut it on purpose, but I caught it.
Whispers first, a quiet hesitation, a strange discomfort, a sense that something is slightly off. The problem is that modern life has filled the mind with so much noise that people no longer recognize subtle internal signals. Constant stimulation, constant distraction, constant performance. Silence has become uncomfortable because silence forces people to hear themselves, and many are terrified of what their intuition has been trying to say for years. Some already know their relationship is emotionally dead. Some know their friends secretly resent them. Some know they have built an identity entirely around pleasing others. But acknowledgement changes everything. Because once awareness appears, responsibility follows. You can no longer pretend you did not see it. That is why people often attack truth before they attack deception. Truth demands transformation. Deception allows comfort. Kindness without boundaries quietly teaches people how to use you. The disturbing reality is that many social relationships survive not through authenticity, but through mutual performance. One person performs strength, the other performs loyalty. One performs confidence, the other performs admiration. But beneath the performance exists an unspoken fear. If I reveal my real thoughts, this connection may collapse. So people maintain roles instead of intimacy, and intuition feels the emptiness beneath it. You notice conversations becoming mechanical, laughter becoming strategic, affection becoming conditional. Something inside you begins pulling away long before the relationship physically ends. The unconscious understands energy before the conscious mind understands events. This is why betrayal rarely feels shocking after it happens. Painful? Yes, but rarely shocking. Because somewhere deep beneath denial, you already knew. The signs were always there. The delayed responses, the passive disrespect, the subtle emotional distance, the hidden irritation whenever you succeeded. But the human mind has an extraordinary ability to ignore reality when reality threatens attachment, especially when loneliness is involved. Loneliness makes people tolerate behavior they would normally reject. It lowers psychological standards. It makes disrespect feel acceptable. It convinces people that partial connection is better than emptiness. And this is where intuition becomes most important. Because intuition is not merely about detecting danger in others. Sometimes it is about recognizing the ways you abandon yourself to avoid being abandoned by someone else. That realization changes everything. Because eventually you begin to understand something unsettling. The people who hurt you most consistently were often the people your intuition warned you about first. And once you realize that, a darker question begins to emerge. If intuition warned you from the beginning, or why did you stay? Most people immediately blame love, or loyalty, or hope. But beneath all of those explanations is something far more uncomfortable: familiarity. Human beings are drawn toward emotional environments that resemble their psychological conditioning. Even painful dynamics can feel strangely attractive when they mirror what the nervous system already understands. Chaos feels like chemistry. Emotional inconsistency feels like passion. Neglect feels normal. So when intuition speaks, it often collides against years of unconscious programming. One part of you recognizes danger. Another part mistakes that danger for home. This is why self-awareness can become painful very quickly. Because eventually you stop asking, why are people like this? And start asking, why do I keep accepting it? That question changes the direction of consciousness completely. Jung believed that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Most people never realize how predictable their emotional patterns actually are. They repeatedly trust the same personalities, repeat the same relational dynamics, experience the same disappointment wearing different faces, different names, same psychological script. The intuitive mind notices this pattern long before the conscious ego does. That is why certain people trigger immediate discomfort in you despite appearing socially acceptable. Something in their behavior resembles an old wound your nervous system remembers. Not every intuition is mystical. Sometimes it is trauma recognizing itself. And this is where things become dangerous. Because unresolved wounds distort perception. A betrayed person may see betrayal everywhere. An abandoned person may constantly anticipate rejection. A humiliated person may interpret neutrality as disrespect. This is why Jung emphasized shadow work so heavily. Without confronting your own unconscious fears, you cannot fully trust your perceptions. Fear can imitate intuition. Projection can imitate intuition. Paranoia can imitate intuition. And many people destroy relationships not because intuition guided them, but because unresolved pain controlled them from beneath awareness. The shadow does not only contain darkness, it also contains rejected intelligence, instinct, anger, boundaries, self-respect. Many people were taught to suppress these parts of themselves in order to be accepted socially. So they became agreeable, polite, emotionally accessible, but internally, resentment began accumulating. Because every ignored instinct creates internal division. The personality says yes. The nervous system says no. Over time, this contradiction becomes impossible to sustain. You see it happen everywhere. People smiling while secretly exhausted, helping others while quietly hating them. Maintaining relationships they emotionally left years ago. Modern society rewards emotional performance more than helping others while quietly hating them. Maintaining relationships they emotionally left years ago. Modern society rewards emotional performance more than psychological honesty, and intuition threatens performance. Because intuition pulls attention toward what is real, not what is socially convenient. That is why highly intuitive people often feel isolated, not because they are superior, but because once you begin seeing unconscious behavior clearly, ordinary social interaction changes forever. You notice hidden hierarchies in conversations. You notice envy disguised as jokes. You notice dominance hidden inside kindness. You begin realizing that many interactions are not based on connection at all, but negotiation. Who receives attention? Who receives validation? Who controls emotional atmosphere? And once that awareness deepens, innocence disappears permanently. You stop interpreting people purely through words. You start reading tension, timing, contradiction, silence, because silence often reveals more than language ever could. There is a moment in psychological awakening that feels almost cruel. The moment you realize how much of human behavior is driven by unconscious hunger, the hunger to be admired, to feel superior, to avoid shame, to control perception. Most people never fully become themselves. They become whatever version of themselves receives the least resistance from the world around them. And over time, the performance hardens into identity. This is why authenticity unsettles people so deeply. A person who trusts their intuition becomes harder to manipulate because they stop relying entirely on external validation. They stop needing constant agreement to confirm what they already feel internally, and that quietly threatens social structures built on performance. People often claim they want honesty. What they actually want is reassurance. Real honesty changes relationships. Real honesty exposes power dynamics, exposes resentment, exposes hidden motives. That is why intuitive people are frequently described as too intense. Not because they create tension, but because they notice tension that others are trying to suppress. And suppression is the true engine of modern social behavior. Entire friendships survive through avoidance. Entire families survive through silence. Entire relationships survive through mutually agreed emotional blindness. Everyone senses the truth. Nobody says it aloud. Because speaking truth risks social exile. Human beings fear isolation more than deception. That fear controls far more behavior than people realize. A man will remain in a degrading relationship because loneliness terrifies him. A woman will silence her instincts because she fears being perceived as difficult. Friends will tolerate disrespect for years to preserve belonging. The need for connection often overrides the need for truth. And this is why intuition becomes psychologically terrifying. If you can only perform when that becomes psychologically terrifying. Because intuition keeps interrupting the illusion. It keeps returning at night, during silence, during eye contact that feels emotionally empty. It whispers, "This is not what it appears to be." The conscious mind resists, but the body remembers. That tension between inner knowing and external performance slowly changes a person. You become more observant, more detached, less easily impressed by charm. Because charm without congruence eventually becomes visible. You start noticing how some people only show warmth when they need something, how others subtly withdraw when attention is no longer focused on them, how envy can exist even inside friendship. Especially inside friendship. The most dangerous resentment often comes from people who feel close enough to compare themselves to you constantly. Not strangers. Proximity intensifies psychological tension. People can tolerate your success from a distance, but your growth becomes unbearable when it forces them to confront their own stagnation. And intuition notices this shift before words ever do. The delayed enthusiasm, the artificial support, the hidden irritation beneath polite encouragement. Sometimes people do not hate you because you harmed them. Sometimes your existence simply reminds them of the person they failed to become.
Woo!
That realization changes how you interpret human behavior forever. Suddenly, betrayal feels less random, envy feels less personal, manipulation feels less emotional and more instinctive. You begin seeing human beings not as purely rational creatures, but as psychological survival systems constantly protecting identity, protecting ego, protecting self-image, protecting unconscious wounds. And once you see that clearly, another realization emerges. Most conflict is not created by truth. It is created by threatened identity. Because when truth threatens the identity someone built to survive, the mind will often choose illusion over transformation, even if the illusion destroys them slowly. Eventually, trusting your intuition stops feeling empowering. It starts feeling lonely, because awareness changes the way you move through the world. You speak less, observe more, detach faster, not out of arrogance, but exhaustion. Once you recognize how often people hide themselves behind masks, social interaction begins to feel different. You notice how carefully most conversations are managed, how rarely people say what they actually mean, how much energy is spent maintaining appearances. And the strange part is that many are not consciously lying. They are lying to themselves first. That is what makes the shadow so dangerous. The shadow is not evil in the theatrical sense. It is unconsciousness. It is the hidden part of the personality that controls behavior, while the conscious mind continues believing it is virtuous. A person may genuinely believe they support you while secretly envying you. They may believe they are honest while constantly manipulating perception. They may believe they love you while quietly resenting your independence. Human beings are fragmented creatures, and intuition detects fragmentation. You can feel when someone's words and energy no longer align. You can feel when affection becomes obligation. You can feel when respect quietly dies beneath familiarity, because respect is fragile. Once people become too comfortable with your presence, they often stop seeing you consciously. They begin interacting with their assumptions of you instead of your actual self. That is why many relationships slowly decay without dramatic conflict. No betrayal, no explosion. Just gradual unconscious neglect. Attention disappears first, then curiosity, then effort, and eventually the connection survives only through routine. Most people don't notice the exact moment emotional death begins. Intuitive people often do. That awareness can become heavy, because you start mourning relationships long before they officially end. You feel the distance while everyone else still performs normalcy. And perhaps this is one of the cruelest aspects of intuition. You often lose people psychologically before you lose them physically. The energy changes first. Everything else follows later. Carl Jung once wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul, and modern life makes avoidance easy. Constant distraction, constant entertainment, constant noise. Silence is dangerous because silence removes escape routes. In silence, intuition becomes louder. Suddenly you remember things you ignored, patterns you rationalized, moments your body reacted before your mind did, and you begin understanding how many of your worst experiences were preceded by quiet internal warnings you abandoned for the sake of comfort. That realization creates a deep form of grief. Not only grief for what others did to you, but grief for every moment you abandoned yourself to preserve attachment. Every time you tolerated disrespect. Every time you silenced discomfort. Every time you ignored instinct because loneliness felt more frightening than dishonesty. That is the real psychological cost. Self-betrayal slowly fractures identity. A person who consistently ignores their intuition eventually loses trust in themselves entirely. And once self-trust disappears, manipulation becomes easy, because people who doubt their own perception become dependent on external interpretation. They ask others what to feel, what to tolerate, what to ignore. Meanwhile, the unconscious continues screaming beneath the surface. This is why reclaiming intuition is not simply about becoming aware. It is about rebuilding internal loyalty, learning to stop negotiating against your own perception for the comfort of others. Because eventually you realize something cold about human nature. The world often rewards those who betray themselves quietly. But the soul keeps score anyway, and deep down, it always knows.
Yep. And that's the end of it. This is a quick live. Catch y'all on the next one. Peace.